Hi, hello, welcome if you're new, welcome back if you're not. My name is Rink. I am a digital illustrator and a webcomic artist. I wanted to preface this video with a couple things. First being the fact that I've tried putting this video together 2 or 3 times over the past year or so. Obviously it hasn't happened yet. But as a result, the script and everything is like a year old at this point, so there's a couple things that have changed since I first wrote it versus now. The main one being that I have since taken my comic off of the Webtoon platform as well as Tapas, and have decided to focus on just promoting through self-hosting and like Comic Fury and stuff like that. Both platforms have been making some changes and like policy decisions and things like that that I just haven't really been vibing with lately, so I've decided just to yoink my comic off of their platforms entirely and focus on doing all the hard work myself because I love to suffer. I think the majority of the information in the video is still accurate for the most part, but this video will also be touching on some heavier topics in regards to things like Webtoon and manga scheduling, production schedules, and all that stuff like that. I don't want to say it's not important because it is, but you know, just in case. I don't know. I think that's it actually. So now that that's out of the way, let's get into the meat of the video and find out why I will never be successful on Webtoon and why I have, since I wrote this script, have taken my comic off the platform. Real quick before I forget, the art in this video is fan art of Lila and Laylee, 2 characters from A Bride's Story by Kaoru Mori, one of my favorite manga ever in existence. I apologize for the choppy nature of the video. I was screen recording on my iPad because the Clip Studio time-lapse function doesn't always work on my iPad, like the file gets corrupted. I did a screen recording, but I forgot to record some parts, so I apologize for the kind of janky artwork recording. If you skip the intro for some reason, my name is Rink, and I am a webcomic artist. I make a historical fantasy magical girl webcomic, Saffron Wave. It is a magical girl story set during the time of the Minoan civilization. I've been developing the idea for about 10 years, give or take, and in 2020 I started posting pages online. Up to that point I'd been on an extended break from webcomics, so I had to get to grips with how the webcomic landscape had changed since I last took part in it. This included, namely, the Webtoon platform becoming one of the more prominent hosting sites available. If you're unfamiliar with what any of the words that I'm talking about are, webcomics are comics that you post on the web. You post them online. Webtoon is a platform for hosting webcomics, which have also, in turn, been called webtoons as like a blanket term, which is a personal pet peeve of mine. But the platform is probably most well known for its vertical scrolling comics designed for easier reading on mobile devices like phones and tablets. There are 2 primary sections of the website in regards to posting comics: Canvas and Originals. Most folks will start out on Canvas, which is the free uploader that anyone with an account can use. If you're lucky and you play the Webtoons game correctly, you may get picked up as an original and take on a contract to become a paid creator for the site. Now that you have a little bit of background, let's dive into the whole reason that I'm making this video. Now, I will start by saying a lot of this is just my personal bias, being a little bit of a dinosaur in the webcomics world. But the whole point of this video is that I will not be successful on Webtoon. I have no intention of being successful on Webtoon. At the time of recording this, I have taken my comic off of Webtoon because they're not really all that great if you really look at everything. All right, the primary reason that I dislike the, I guess, culture that Webtoon has created is largely because of the work culture that they've built around creating a webtoon, creating a webcomic, as it's come to be known in the past few years. So most people, at least when I was first starting out to make webcomics, people would post between 1 and 3 pages a week, 5 if you were really ambitious. But comics were made at a much slower pace than people expect them to be made now, which is a huge difference in my opinion. Webtoon generally, at least from what I've seen, requires at least 40 panels per update. The majority of what I've seen is in full color. I haven't really seen a lot of black and white or otherwise monochromatic webtoons. And you also need to be consistent and fairly constant with your uploading schedule. This also ties into the manga industry based off of what I've been reading and hearing about over the entire course of my life, that they also have pretty demanding schedules that can really take a toll on the creator. Webcomics generally are made by one person, maybe a small group of people, but generally it's just one person doing everything by themselves. And making a full color webcomic that updates at least once a week is a lot of work. It is very time consuming. There's a lot that goes into it. And there's a lot that goes into it that other people don't necessarily see, because all they see is the finished pages or episodes at the result of all the hard work. They don't see everything that goes into it behind the scenes, like maintaining the website and writing the script and editing and like all these other things that go into the process of making a full narrative with a webcomic. Okay, so I'm just going to go over my process really quickly. This isn't the be-all, end-all for everybody. This isn't how you should make your comic. This isn't like the preferred way. This is just what I do to make my comic. There's probably going to be some extra steps in here that other people don't feel like they need to do or feel like they need to bother with. That's fine. I'm just putting my process out here as sort of like a baseline for what goes into making the pages for my comic. I have to write the script. I have to do my thumbnail rough sketches to figure out what panels are going to go on what page and what's going to go in the panels. I do a lot of refining sketches. I take the thumbnails and I flush them out so I can actually tell who is who, what's going on, what's happening. This is where I really nail down what is happening in a given panel on a given page. I have to ink everything. I work in full color, so I have to color everything. This includes laying down the flat colors, shading, highlights, special effects if there are going to be anything. I have to do all the same process for the background because I'm crazy and I do everything in separate little groups of layers. My character is on one set of layers and then I have my backgrounds on a separate set of layers, which is completely unnecessary. I could draw everything just on the same set of layers if I really wanted to, but I don't want to. I tend to copy and paste a lot of my background elements if a scene is going to be taking place in the same environment to save myself time, because this is a lot of work. I also have to add in the speech bubbles and the dialogue and format the page for uploading because I draw on much larger canvases than what I end up posting to my website as the final image. I have to cue everything to upload. I have to write my little author comments, which that's not really necessary, but I like doing that. I like commenting on a given page, saying I like the art, I like how something turned out, just whatever silly little thought is in my head. And then there's also promoting it. I promote it on Twitter, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram. And I'm doing this on more or less a weekly basis. I think the only thing that I really do in advance is writing my script and doing a lot of like the sketching stages, like the thumbnails and the more polished sketches that I will ink over. Everything else is done more or less on a weekly basis. This is on top of me having a day job as well. This isn't what I do full time. I would love to do webcomics full time, but I can't. I don't, so I have a day job as well, and it's a lot. It's a lot of work, it's a lot of time. I basically treat my webcomic like a second job that doesn't really pay me anything. Now, all of that aside, this doesn't include things like managing the website and other administrative tasks. A lot of webcomics that I tend to follow use a traditional page format because the underlying intent is to make a printed book one day. That's what I would like to do with my comic. I would love to make a printed book one day that I can hold in my hand and be like, hey, I made this. Read it. I'm going to shove it in your face so you can read it. Because that's always been my goal, is to make comics that people can hold in their hands and read. A lot of my inspiration for making comics comes from reading manga and stuff growing up. So that's always what I wanted to do. I've always wanted to have my comics on my bookshelves. So I'd use a more standard page format because I want to ultimately print the book one day. And it's a lot easier to format pages for printing if you draw them with the intention for printing versus if you do a vertical format, which it can be difficult to rearrange panels into a page format from what I've heard from other creators. So by using the page format, you are relatively limited with the amount of stuff that you can put on a given page. This isn't necessarily the case with the vertical format. That is, just a long, very, very long image that you scroll through. You can put however many panels that you'd like into that, episode, as they call it. And so you're not as limited with your formatting, at least to some degree, as you would be if you do the normal page format, like I like to do and like what I like to read. Right, so on average, my pages have between, I'm going to say 3 and 6 panels on average. I use fairly large panels. I don't really like cramming a lot of tiny panels onto the page because that can get kind of like muddy and difficult to read. So my pages average between 3 and 6 panels per page. Webtoons, specifically from the Webtoon platform, seem to want at least 40 panels in an update. That is a lot of, that is like easily more than like 4 times what I normally do for my comic on a weekly basis. But Webtoon wants that done every single week. And that is a lot of work. That is a lot of pressure to meet a very short deadline and have, such a high standard of work that they expect from their creators. This pressure, naturally, obviously, ends up having a negative effect on the creators. At the time of writing this script, a survey had come out relatively recently that reported high numbers of mental and physical health issues in creators due to the high demands and intense work schedule demanded by Webtoon. We've even seen, unfortunately, some creators developing very severe health issues and passing away due to the intense workload. And this isn't exclusive to Webtoon. I hear quite often in the manga industry in Japan also driving its creators to exhaustion and beyond to meet their intense deadlines for content publication. Now, I'm not going to get too deep into this. I'm sure since this is really old news at this point, other people out there have gone over the survey and its implications and everything in much better detail than I ever could, with a much better understanding of it. So I'm not going to try and explain all of that with my limited knowledge of how the industry actually works, since I'm not a contracted creator in any capacity. I'm just one person doing this for fun. I set my deadlines. I am beholden to nobody but myself, so I don't feel like I can accurately comment on the working conditions of other creators. So I make a full color webcomic. A lot of other people that I know or whose work that I follow also make full color webcomics. This isn't the standard, but it's definitely pretty common. But I do come across and read quite a few black and white or monochromatic comics as well. But I make a full color comic because I love color. I love making my little characters look like actual anime characters. So I have a pretty big workload when it comes to making my comic. I have to do everything myself, from the writing, the sketching, to the actual drawing, to promotion and research. Because I have a historical comic, I have to do research for so many things to make sure that what I'm portraying is accurate in my comic, on top of working a full-time day job. I can't afford to hire assistants to help with the workload. I would love to have someone help with the things I'm not good at or don't particularly like doing, and speed up the rate at which I make pages so I can get through the story faster, but that's just not feasible for me right now. I don't know if that will ever be feasible, but as of right now, that is not something that I can do. I cannot hire somebody to help me, so I have to do everything. As a result, I can only manage 1 page a week for updates as of right now. I would like to increase that to 2 pages a week, but I'm going to have to really like rework my work process is, so that I can make pages at a faster rate. But right now, with my whole process and my day job and real life stuff and everything, I can comfortably, sanely manage 1 page a week. And then I also try to have a buffer, which is a backlog of completed pages. That way I can queue pages to post ahead of time, so I'm not scrambling to meet my deadline each week, and I can have, a couple weeks to work on the next coming pages, so I'm not stressing myself out trying to complete a page before it's supposed to go up. At the pace that I'm currently at, I will never be able to meet the demand for 40 plus panels per update. I draw way too slowly for that. And with my ADHD, time management is very, very difficult for me. So I can't do that. I can't do any more than what I'm capable of, and I am not willing to sacrifice myself to get stuff done faster, if that makes sense. Another thing that's kind of put me off from the platform, even when I was using it, was the fact that what I like to make and what's popular and seems to do well don't line up, at all. The most popular series on Webtoon, at least as far as I can see, tend to be romance, isekai, or more action-oriented stuff. I make a historical magical girl comic. Granted, it does have action, you gotta fight the monsters, it will feature romance at some point in the story whenever I get to that point, but those aren't the main selling points. That's not the target demographic that I'm going for, is people that read romance comics, people that read action comics. I'm trying to catch people who like magical girl comics, and people who like interesting takes on historical settings. Those two things very much do not align with what seems to be popular on sites like Webtoon and Tapas. So given my slow updating pace, relatively niche content, and the fact that I don't adhere to the vertical scrolling format, it's not surprising that I never really gained as much traction as other creators on the platforms might have. In my early days posting on the platform, I would even get comments complaining about my short updates, and I switched to posting pages on Webtoon every other week instead of every week to try and combat that. But that was about as far as I was willing to go to try and adhere to the kind of culture that they built on that website. I've never really liked Webtoon as a platform. I'm just going to be completely honest. There was just something that did not vibe with me when I signed up to the platform. I didn't like the energy there, and I think that's because the webcomics world that I'm used to, the webcomic world that I was part of for such a long time and have been trying to get back into, is very much based on community, and there isn't really much of that on Webtoon as far as I've seen. I primarily host my comic on Comic Fury. It's kind of as close as you can get to self-hosting without actually having to know how to code, and it's got a very strong sense of community. It still has an active forum, which is definitely a dated thing at this point, I think. But it's got a very active forum and a pretty large user base and a wide variety of comics. I also like that because it is similar to self-hosting, I can customize my website to make it look exactly how I want, which I can't do on platforms like Webtoon and Tapas, because they just have their single, this is how the site looks, you can't edit it. The most that you'll maybe get is a little colored indicator indicating what genre your comic is. Comic Fury is a very old school platform by today's standards, but that's honestly why I love it so much. There's a really good balance between readers and creators, and a lot of the creators are very active on the forum and are willing to comment on your comic, and you can have conversations with people. I haven't had any sort of experience even remotely similar to that on Webtoon. Tapas was a little better, but I still didn't get nearly the engagement and interaction that I would get on Comic Fury. Right. At least in regards to Webtoon, there seemed to be a pretty big divide between readers and creators. Creators existed just to make the thing, and readers read the thing. And that was it, in my experience. Like, I know that's not necessarily the case for everybody and for every comic, but that was my experience. And I did not like that. I didn't like that it felt like the readers couldn't interact with me in any way aside from, like, demanding things of me as a content creator, finger quotes. I didn't really like the vibe. I didn't like the energy there because of things like that. I didn't like the culture. I didn't like that I couldn't personalize my comics page on Webtoon and make it look how I wanted so it could be all nice and aesthetic and fit the vibe of my comic. Didn't like that vertical scroll comics were the preferred format and people would get upset at me for posting my normal pages. It was just very weird and a very demanding culture that they've cultivated, and I do not like that. And there also wasn't a really good notification system for getting new comments whenever I would get comments. So one of my fellow members of the Aradia Comic Collective created a plugin for web browsers that would check for new comics so that I didn't have to go to each page individually looking for comments, because the website itself would never update me or notify me in any capacity to let me know, hey, you have a new comment. So all of these things combined led to just a really sour experience for me. And I just could not really integrate myself into the platform's culture in any sort of, like, beneficial way. And honestly, I'd considered abandoning the platform altogether at several points in times because people didn't really seem to care about the story out. They just wanted something to consume. They didn't actually want to, like, interact with me or the world that I was trying to build and present or anything like that. They just wanted content to consume without actually seeming to care if I was able to deliver it or not. So all of these things combined, the little light bulb in my head went off and I realized that I will never be a successful comic creator on the Webtoon platform. I am not ready nor willing to destroy myself to meet somebody else's demands and compromise the story that I've spent so much time working on. I'm not willing to compromise my story, my characters, my physical and mental well-being for the sake of being popular on one platform. Like, that does not have as much payoff as the platform seems to make it think that it does. Would I like my comic to be popular? Yes, obviously. I would love for my comic to, make waves, as it were, and reach a bunch of people and have people that are interested in the characters and the world and want to know what's going on, and they want to make their own little fan theories and everything, because that's what I like about reading webcomics. Is I can be like, oh, this aspect of the world is interesting. I like these characters. What would happen if X or Y happened to characters A and B? Like, I like being able to interact both as a creator and a reader. And Webtoon did not really have the capacity for that. And that was a really big deterrent for me. So I'm just out here doing my own thing now. I'm making the kind of comic that I want to read. And yeah, it's not necessarily what huge companies like Webtoon are going to be interested in promoting or acquiring, but that's what I want to make, I also take long breaks between posting chapters specifically so I can have time to rest and recharge before jumping back into my comic, so that I can prevent things like burnout and actual physical illnesses from my workload. And that's not even going into the wider problem of the need to be constantly updating or posting in order to stay relevant on any number of platforms that social media today demands of people, demands of creators. Frankly, it's exhausting, and I'm already spending tons of my own free time making this comic, doing all this research, working on the website and all of that. I don't have the spare energy to be constantly posting to 17 different platforms just to get my name out there. And you know what? I don't care. I don't care about any of that. I am making and sharing the comic that I am making because it's something that I love, it's something that I'm passionate about, and it's something that I hope other people will think is interesting and they will also learn to love it. I hope that they'll find something interesting about the culture that I'm trying to bring back to life effectively. I hope people think my magic system is interesting and that, like, the monsters and the rules and all of that are unique, hopefully. Would I like to make tons of money off my comic and have tons of readers and merchandise and all of that? Yes, of course. But I'm not going to sacrifice myself for it. I don't need any of it. One of my favorite manga artists, Kaoru Mori, makes crazy detailed artwork and very well-researched settings, and her comics come out at a far slower pace than mine. And nobody's complaining about that. So why should I stress myself out and ruin my life to meet the demands of somebody else? That is not going to be rewarding in any way to me. I would much rather take a similar approach to Kaoru Mori and take my time making something that I'm happy with versus destroying myself trying to meet someone else's unrealistic demands. I don't care that I won't make it on Webtoon. That's not my goal. That has never been my goal, to be successful on one platform. And that's fine. Maybe I'm just being stubborn, I don't know. But I will never be successful on Webtoon, and I'm perfectly okay with that. That is it. That is all that I have to say on this topic. Hopefully I'm able to edit this together in a way that makes it make sense. Hopefully it's not confusing or meandering in any way. Thank you for sticking it out and making it this far. If you have, I truly appreciate you. I don't have an upload schedule yet for YouTube. I don't know if I'm ever going to have a schedule with my crappy time management. So if you would like to be notified of my next video, please subscribe and hit the notification bell because I am still really inconsistent with this. Thank you for watching, and I will hopefully see you soon. Bye. Why do you keep knocking all my stuff off the desk? I'm gonna kick you out. Some of this information is going to be pretty old at this point. I wrote the script last year in 2013. Jesus Christ. 2023. 2013. Where is my brain? Oh my god. I'm just gonna start over entirely. Holy shit.